Right, looks like I'm live. So just give it a minute to let people join. Okay, looks like I've got a couple people joined. Can you hear me? Can you give me a thumbs up if you can hear and see all right? Hi, Marjorie. I'll take it down a bit. That's better. Hi, Janet. Thank you for joining me. Okay, so today I wanted to show you how I go about digitizing my sketches. So I've got my iPad, so what you're seeing on the side there is my iPad, and this is a sketch that I've done. Hi Siobhan, hi Tarl from Norway, wow, hi. So I use various different applications to sketch in. Sometimes I sketch on real paper as well, and I'll just take a photograph of it. But this is a sketch I've done. It's literally just drawn lines. I use multiple reference photos usually for my sketches. Occasionally I'll do a project that's using a photograph, for example, of my own cat. I've actually just done Siobhan's dogs, which I will hopefully release soon. And I've actually worked directly off of a photograph in those cases. But most cases I actually create a sketch, and then I will work from that sketch. So I'll take that sketch and I'll save it as a photo. And I can show you I've got quite a few, yeah. A few of my sketches I've done on there, so that's kind of the process I follow. And then I go into, usually I work in Affinity, and I create an SVG in Affinity. Sometimes I work, well, I used to do a lot of work on Premiere Plus 2 Ultra, which is the Husqvarna software, but I was having a lot of software compatibility issues, customers having problems with files. So I've actually switched to Embrilliance, and I've found that Embrilliance doesn't work that great in sketching. So I actually do most of my work in Affinity and save it as an SVG. So I'm going to show you how I do that now. So I'm going to bring that cat sketch in that I did. Oh, not that one. Yeah, there we go. Okay. So I now have my sketch in in Affinity, and I'm just going to reduce its opacity so that it isn't so stark and I can see what I'm doing. And then I am using a pencil tool to draw vectors, which is the same kind of thing, and I'll show you in a second. how I do that in Premiere Plus. And then gotta make sure my settings are correct. No fill. Okay, and then I can draw. So I usually like to start with the eyes. I don't always start with the eyes. Sometimes I start with the nose, but I guess the eyes kind of draw me. And I will start drawing the eyes. The eye is usually, oops, it's still got that fill in it. Okay. So the eye is usually just, will be a fill area. So for now, I'll keep it as just a line. And now you can see I've got lots of sketch lines. Now obviously digitizing, you can't do lots of individual lines like that. It would just create an utter disaster. So that's why I like to start with a sketch that's kind of got the lines I wanted to have. The fur flows in the way I want it to flow. And then from there I can work with my pencil and I can kind of fill the areas in, trying to kind of think about keeping my tip of my pencil in contact with the page at all times. And I've kind of got to know over time how many lines I like to have to make areas. And I will kind of fill it in like that. Now I've stopped the stroke, so I've lifted my pencil. So I can now see where that end point is. That little red dot shows me where I lifted my pen last. Then I can move it around and then I can continue from that point. And then I know that when that line ends, when the needle comes to the end of that line, it'll then just immediately continue with the next line and there won't be a stop. Now those sometimes do get a bit out of order and I have to go back and make sure that there aren't any jump stitches. Sometimes does strange things, and I can kind of just keep following those lines that I have sketched already. So it's not perfect, and this is actually quite a high detailed cat, so this level of fine detail would only work on quite a large embroidery. So the largest cat, I think the second largest one, has this level of detail as well. And I will literally just keep going on and on like that. I'm using my iPad. So I'm actually using an application on my iPad called Affinity Design. So what I'm doing now is I'm actually drawing vectors. Let me show you if I switch to my computer very quickly. If I go into Premiere Plus 2, so I would do a very similar process here. I would add my picture as a background. Let's go remember where I put it. That one, pictures. Oh, I didn't save it, I don't think. Ah, there we go. Okay, so here's my sketch. And then right now what I'm showing you, Emma, is Premiere Plus 2 Ultra. And I'm going to be switching between a few programs, so I'll try and explain what I'm doing. On the iPad, I am using the Apple Pencil. Okay, so when I work in Premiere Plus 2, I usually connect my iPad to my computer. You can use Sidecar. I also use, I think it's called AstroPad, to connect my iPad, so I can actually use it as an extra screen. So I can actually see the embroidery software actually on my iPad. and I can draw, but it's actually working directly on the computer. So if you wanted help with that, I can do that as a separate thing. I think I've actually done a video on that. I can upload it. So I brought my sketch now into Premiere Plus 2, and then I would go in. Again, I would just start on the eye, because I always like to start on the eye. The eye I would want to be solid, and then I would use you could use, I'm using my mouse at the moment because I'm using my iPad for the other work, so I can't use it to connect right now. Change the properties. Where's the black? I can't remember where black is in here anymore. There it is. And then I literally will just exactly the same process. I don't normally like to do it with my mouse because I can't get the same kind of control. But I would literally just keep drawing, and you'll see you'll end up with the same result as what I was doing on my iPad a minute ago. You can, of course, adjust the nodes and do whatever you need to do. You can see the lines look a lot thicker here, so I would use a smaller level of detail for a small embroidery, because I think this hoop is, yeah, it's only a 120 by 120. So I wouldn't follow the lines as closely. Yeah, carry on drawing. So again, I would start from that end point, because that way the machine won't pick it up as a stop at all. And then I will do my first strokes. Now you can see the lines I'm doing now are much wider than were done in my sketch. So I'm still using the direction of my strokes in the sketch to tell me which direction to go in and what I want the fur to look like. So you can see this area is darker, so I'll bring my lines closer to one another. And I'm always thinking ahead, where am I going to go next? Because I don't want to end up kind of at a point and then kind of realize, oh, I can't continue that way, and I have to go back over work I've already done, because that's when I end up with really dense areas. Free edition of what, Emma? So now I'll show you, I'll switch over to Embrilliance. Now Embrilliance is the software I use more now, because of the software compatibility issues I've been having with Premiere Plus 2. Now this one, it doesn't, if I try and sketch with this one, so if I go into Stitch Artist and I grab my pen, if I start doing those kind of strokes, yeah, okay. Yeah. I'm not sure why it's... Oh, I've chosen the wrong tool. Sorry. You can tell I don't do it with this tool very much. When I draw, if I try and do fine hairs, you can see it doesn't kind of draw with the right kind of accuracy. So I find it's not great for detailed work. I use it a lot for working with text and for logos and that kind of thing, but it doesn't sketch very well. So I don't use this one. I don't sketch in this one. And this is where, and I'll go back to my iPad. This is where using my iPad really comes of its own. Okay, Premiere. Yeah, I'm running Premiere on my Mac. There's a few problems with it on there. But yeah, I've got Premiere Plus 2 Ultra is what I'm using on my Mac. Okay, so to go back to, this is now Affinity Designer I'm working in. Again, I'm drawing in vectors now, so I've got vectors selected. So there I've done some quite detailed work. When I want to do, say I wanted this design to be 4x4. I just increase the width of my brush. I find 4 is about the right level. Give me a good idea. And now you'll see, you can't see individual strokes in there anymore. It's just kind of a mishmash. So I would do that again. Let me change this one. So that's kind of, because we want it to be a bit kind of solid, that would be okay. So now I will, whoops, select that, and I'm going to continue drawing from there, but now I'm using a 4-point so I can work a bit smaller. And now again, I'm going to make much bigger strokes and more distance between my strokes so that you can see the individual hairs. Now, something I pay quite a lot of attention to is light and dark, and you can see my light source is kind of coming from this side. So I've got some light areas here. I've got darker areas here. So I work really hard on trying to make it look real, that light is hitting it, that there's some form to the animal. So when I'm working here, I try and keep that same shape of the strokes, but I will keep them much further apart. And I try to keep the strokes kind of natural, adding a little bit more weight on the edges because you don't want them to disappear. Now I'm not joining the ends together now because that takes quite a lot of concentration. I'm trying to show you the technique of drawing the fur. So I try really hard. You can see that this fur is going in that direction. So all of my strokes will go in that direction, and I'll keep them closer together where here there's a sort of a darker stripe that the cat has. And then they'll get further apart where I want things to be lighter. Now, areas where there are, like here, I've got a lot of individual strokes. And I try to keep those to an absolute minimum. So I will come in and I'll kind of do a stroke here, and then I'll follow it up. And I'll sort of think about how I can go around it, and I'll come down. I can stop for a moment just to sort of think about it. And then I'll kind of just do a bit of a zigzag in there, just so you get that impression of little bits of hair sticking in there. And it's really just getting a feel for what the strokes do as you're drawing them. Keeping them in the right direction. Here again, there's just like a little stroke, so I'll just bring a little one up there. And I'll just keep going. I do undo a lot. So I'll draw a bit and go, no, I didn't like that. I'll undo it and I'll draw it again. It's a lot of trial and error, just kind of trying to figure out what works. When it comes to the whiskers, I try to make sure, so I'm just going to fill this area in. Okay, so now we've got these sort of whiskers above the left eye. Say this is my last, no, that one was my last stroke, I think. Okay, so I try to make sure that where those whiskers are, all the fur has been completed underneath before I do the whiskers. That way the whiskers will then sit on top of the fur rather than getting buried underneath. So I'll find my way back to where the whiskers are, and then I will stop, and then I'll do a single stroke for the whisker, and then a single stroke for that whisker. So what I'm doing, imagine if those were already done. They're single strokes for the whiskers, and then I'll show you how I treat them in a bit. White areas are really, really important when you're working on animals, because if you just fill every area in with fur, it's all just going to look the same. It's going to look just as dense as everywhere else. So keeping white areas open is really important, because although there would be fur there, you need that contrast to give them the character that they have. So you'll see I've got these kind of areas there and then there, which I keep completely white. And it's really important to have those areas. Another area that's quite tricky is animals that have this kind of hair inside the ears, because you're working on a negative there, because these hairs, each of those individual hairs are white, but you really want them to stand out. Of course, if you're working with color, you can just do white thread, but for my monotone animals, it took me a while to figure out how to do that. So this is where sketching before you try and digitize, even if I'm working from a photograph, if I've got an ear that looks like this, I will always sketch it first, so that I have these definite lines that go around each individual hair that I can follow, so that I can work in the negative, filling in the dark areas around the hair. And I don't have to try and visualize where it is, because it's right there and I can see it. Okay. And then I'll go in and trying to pay attention again to the direction the fur is going in. Every stroke must go in the direction the fur actually goes in, so you don't have any extraneous lines, because density becomes a real problem, as I've learned as I've been doing these. My first few were quite dense. My machine handled it just fine, but a lot of machines can't handle the high density. So it took a while for me to figure out how to keep that density down. So that's how I create the lines. Now, if I just turn the picture off. So obviously this is only a very small portion of the cat, but I'm going to select these and I'm going to export them as an SVG. I'm going to call it test cat. Test cat, not car. Okay. Now I'm going to go into Premiere. Oh no, I'm going into Embrilliance now. And when I'm in Stitch Artist, I can bring in the vector. It's there. Pictures. And there's my vector. And when it brings it in, SVGs don't kind of... Oops, sorry, I forgot to take you back to the computer. I apologize. Okay, that's what I did there. I'll show you again. I'm in Stitch Artist and I select Vector. And then I can bring the vector in. Now the problem with SVGs is they don't retain a size. So they will always pop in, I don't know, usually much bigger than what I've intentionally been drawing. Select them all and I can just bring them down. I'm actually going to make it a bit smaller even. Okay. So I think I was drawing this to be quite a small one. Okay, so now I can zoom selected. So now the job is to go and turn these all into stitches. So the eye I now want to be a fill, so I will go back into Stitch Artist and add it as a fill. And then I've got that little piece inside the eye. Where did it go? So I've got this little bit that's inside the eye. So I need to make sure that that little piece comes after the eye. Can't add things last for some reason. And if I select both of those, I can either, can you see that when I bring that menu down? I can either choose in the create menu, I can say outline combine holes, but I really like these path tools that are at the top of the page here. and I use the logical subtract. Did it work? No, I did it twice. Okay, I'm going to take them back to a line. There's logical, logical subtract, and then I add the fill. And I'm not sure why it's not working. My piece there. Best laid plans. Okay. I'm going to take the fill off of that. And do the logical subtract. And I honestly have no idea why it's disappearing. Because I do that like every day. Okay. That's how you should do it. And then you should end up with a fill with a hole in it. Let me try combine holes. Combine holes. There we go. Okay. And then all the rest of my lines, I can go along, select them all, and I can turn them into running stitches. And I can choose how long or short I want the stitch length to be. When I'm working on 4x4, they usually are 2 millimeters or under, because they're just too small otherwise. I'm going to change my hoop to a 100 by 100. And then I can shrink it down. Oops. Okay, so you can see at that size, the strokes look about right. Now for the whiskers, because I want the whisker to be a double line, and if we look at the end points, the end point is currently over there. So at the moment, it'll stitch this whisker and then it'll stop and make an end point there. So I give them a double line, and then you can see the end point comes back down there. So then the needle will run up the whisker, come straight back down then, and then continue with the next piece. The other thing I can do is you can check where your jump stitches are. And as you can see, because of the way I drew this, there are jump stitches all over the place. But for instance, this piece is separate to that piece, but because the end of the line ends where the start of the next line goes, there's no jump stitch there, and you literally don't have to do anything. It'll just continue going. So yeah, do you have any questions? Anything you'd like me to focus on or highlight? Do you want to just go ahead and draw some more so you can watch me do it? So I'll go back to my iPad. Please, if you have any questions, just post in the comments. So I'm going to delete everything I did there. Bring back the photo. Okay. So I'm going to start in the corner of the eye because I want to be able to start and stop this part of the eye. And then continue in the rest of the eye. So I'll get that shine there. Thank you, Janet. So now I'm going to continue from there. I kept my start point of this line approximately where the fill ended. As you can see, it's quite wonky, but that doesn't matter because I can go and adjust it. So this is quite a dark stripe on the cat, so I'm going to fill it in quite well. and then it comes a bit lighter over here, but this is the shaded side of the cat's face. So I'm going to keep it quite dense, but I want some space in between the hairs so that you get some definition and it's not as dark. Okay, as we get to the cheek, it gets a bit lighter again as the bulges over the cheek. And then we have a bit of a darker stripe going under the eye. Okay. Some loose stitches here, just to give it a bit of definition. Now I'm going to move on to the other eye. Again, we've got this dark stripe under the eye. Okay. I actually think I want to start my eye here this time. So I'm going to delete some of these nodes. So I don't have to redraw all of that. I can just delete these nodes and take it back to approximately where I want it to be. So I'm going to bring it to there, and then I'm going to come around and do the eyeball and the shine. And then from there I can continue. Thank you very much. This eyebrow is a bit darker again. And then we've got this stripe here. Follow the stripes. Now again, I can see that this is an area here where there's whiskers. So I'm going to try and fill that whole whisker area in before I go down to where the whiskers are rooted. This is a nice loose area. And try and keep some white space there. I'm not going to focus too much on the ear right now because I want to come back to that. So I'm going to kind of edge around it a bit. Down at the bottom here, I'm leaving myself space to come back into that area again, so I can make sure I get this whole area where the whiskers are covered. I'm going to come down and I'm going to do a single stroke for the whisker, single stroke for that whisker, and I'll come up a bit and a single stroke for that whisker. And I can come back round. Sometimes fall into the trap of drawing too fast and then I don't get the accuracy I want. Try and just take my time. I also tend not to want to stop, and then my hand starts aching. So stopping and starting every now and then, starting a new stroke does help. Okay, so this again is coming to an area where the whiskers are, so I'm going to try and cover that whole area before I draw the whiskers in. It's a bit light here. Some heavier stripes. Okay, and then I'll do a single stroke for that whisker. And I think the other whisker is... I normally would have a picture open so I can follow what I'm doing as well, not just what I'm drawing over. Okay. Yeah, using the SVGs, I think I've been using SVGs for so long as a graphic artist that it's such a natural thing for me to use them. They're really, really powerful. There's so much you can do with them. And I've also then taken them like to my silhouette to cut things on my silhouette, so it can be quite handy. Okay, so I'm making sure I'm keeping these white areas looking as much like individual kind of hairs as I can. This is quite a dark area in the ear. Okay, thinking about where I'm going to go next. So I'm going to go up the ear, and I can go down that rim of the ear again. Okay, so I have kind of trapped myself. Don't really have anywhere to go now. This is something I try to aim away from. So I could stop now and do a jump stitch to elsewhere, but I think I'm going to allow a slightly darker patch here since it is the edge of the face. And bring myself around to here. And I'd go up to the nose. So I'm not going to draw the whole cat because it would be a bit boring to sit and watch me do the whole thing. Now, certain bits I'm not that happy with. So I can go in now and I can play with the nodes a bit before I even take it into the embroidery software. Some areas there may be more nodes than are necessary, so I can go in and I can delete some nodes. Still try and keep it natural. Anywhere I think there are just more nodes than are necessary, I can just take them out. This is quite good software. It doesn't tend to produce an awful lot more nodes than I actually needed. You know, areas like, let me get another color. Oops, that's not what I wanted to do. Pen. So areas like, I'm going to circle it like that and then select it. You can see there's lots of nodes in there, but most of them are actually needed, because if I removed, say, that node, you can see that that hair, that line becomes too straight. So a lot of the nodes are actually needed to keep that kind of natural sketched form. So I try not to remove too many, and I'll show you what I mean again when I move into Embrilliance. So I'm going to turn that off. I'm going to export it as an SVG. Okay. And I'll switch again to Embrilliance if I select all of those. Now I can bring them in as a vector again, test cat 2. So you can see it's come in really, really big. So I'm going to shrink it down to fit the hoop, and then I'll make it a bit smaller even. And I'll go to Stitch Artist. Now I'm going to select everything and make it a line. Then I know my whiskers I want to be double lines, so I'm going to select, oops, wrong button, select all the whiskers for that one. No, that's part of the eye. And I'm going to make those double. And you can see instantly I've almost got no jump stitches whatsoever. If I take these ones, so that and that, let's see if I can get that to work. No, it doesn't want to work on this one for some reason. So I'll do outline, combine holes. I can then turn, sorry, had the wrong thing selected. Create outline, combine holes, and I can turn that into a fill. And do the same with these two. Create outline, combine holes, turn that into fill. Oh, that didn't work. Why doesn't that want to work? Don't know if it's because the nodes aren't aligned properly. Try that one more time. Combine holes. No. Okay, I have no idea why that one's misbehaving, but let's just give them a fill. So we've got some jump stitches on that eye, which I'm not sure why it's not working. But you can see I've got no jump stitches left it now. I can remove, add jump stitches, and I can quite clearly see there aren't any. So yeah, then it's just a case of going around, cleaning it up, making sure it looks the way I want it to look, that the stripes actually look like stripes. Yeah, and I've got enough density in the right areas. And that's basically how I do my animals. So if there's any other parts of the digitizing you'd like me to cover in future lives, I'd be more than happy to do so. I'm quite happy to share what I do. I think I've got quite a unique style, so I'm not afraid of anyone figuring out exactly how I draw my animals or anything like that. So please, I'm very happy to share and teach. So any questions at all, you want me to show you anything, I'm more than happy to do so. I really enjoy this. I enjoy teaching and helping others to be able to produce the art they want. So I hope you enjoyed this video. Thank you all for watching. Doesn't want to end.